All right, traders. Hey, welcome on back here this, well, not Monday, but Tuesday, January 20th, day after Martin Luther King Day. Great to have everyone here in the Bill, Grant, Leda, Michael, Stephen, all of us here just joining us inside our live trading room. Great to have us back for another fantastic edition of our live workshop, Traders Talk. So, if you're on social media, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, especially nowadays, you too as well. Any of us on social media, do yourself a favor first. Make sure to follow, make sure to subscribe right down below, bottom left right there showing our main account at Cyber Trading U on YouTube, on X. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the other stuff. But mainly, if you want to follow us each and every day, just make sure you go right to Cyber Trading U on YouTube as well as on X. But with that said, though, great to have all of us just joining us here. Margaret, Jerry as well, a few more of us here. So without further ado, let me hop right into a small housekeeping note to even start. Real quick, if you're inside our live trading room, if you haven't done this just yet, make sure to register. It's actually started yesterday. Even started on Martin Luther King just yesterday, but the Wealth 365 Summit, huge event across this entire week. But Fausto is going to be on, I believe, tomorrow. So if you want to catch the man himself, definitely go out ahead and register for this event through Wealth 365. And if you're on social media, we're going to post the link there for you too, just for you to take part. But this has been going on all week, just beginning from Monday, and it's going to continue all until Friday. So that should be right there. If you're on the YouTubes, all the social media, just posted that link for you in the chat there too. Fausto will be on tomorrow, so make sure to just put your name, your email, optional phone number, but you'll be good for your registration. Now with that, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this year, right? Who is still in on this IBRX trade? If you're riding out this IBRX trade with me right now inside our live trading room, let me know real quick. Tim, Sharon, few of us here. Very nice. I saw a bunch of us take profit earlier, rightfully so, for a number of reasons. So a few of us did really well on this trade, irregardless, right? So if you made money on this, more money than you typically make on a trade, congratulations, right? Because this was just a gift. This fell into our lap, and it was perfect day, perfect time, perfect moment, and it just crumbled perfectly. So not all these trades do crumble perfectly in our direction, perfectly across the whole way up, but we'll go over this from head to toe. We're going to go over this as our main case study for Traders Talk today. I'll tell you what, I got a bunch of traction on social media myself, on X, on Twitter, that is, for the IBRX trade. Essentially, for us here in our room, Anna, Lauren, Sharon, Tim, Leda, I mean, this is basically what we'd be calling now a meme stock. It's getting a lot of attention on social media, that is. Now, for anyone that's on social that is a huge believer in IBRX, huge believer in the news, you might actually take insult to that. You might take insult to me saying that this is a meme stock. You may be like, oh, no, this is way more than a meme stock. You see what the news is? Of course. But when I say meme stock, I simply mean more discussed online, on social media, right? So in that nature, in that simple definition, it's actually good to be a meme stock. Now the question is, does it have real legitimate news? To me, the answer to that question is absolutely yes. But let me just go back on this, at least from last week, and it was on Wednesday. So I'll get to this line here at some point coming on up. This big fat green line, 7 million shares bought at market. That ain't me, but I wish it was. But we'll go over at least why the stock had popped early this morning on Wednesday in pre-market. If you're on social media, if you're on Facebook Live, LinkedIn, etc., keep in mind, I mean, we're mainly catering to a group of traders, about 120 of us live inside our trading room here. So I'll even show this at least. Probably going to look wonky on the screen, but just focus on the left side. You got all of our students there just chatting throughout the day, and we're mainly catering to them. So we open up our trading room at 8 o'clock in the morning, even a bit earlier, actually. But this news came out at 7:45, 8 o'clock, I think, pretty much. It made a nice run up a little bit afterwards. But the news headline, let me break this open. Benzinga Pro. This was from last week. So ImmunoBio shares trading higher after the company announced results from its Anktiva clinical program. Just a little headline here basically saying met 2 different studies for non-small cell lung cancer. That's just the beginning of this, right? And I'm sure this drug's been through enough testing as is before old CTU here found it. But this was one of the headlines that came out even just before Wednesday the 14th. This was just on Tuesday. The real headline that got me interested in this thing, it's something that you don't really hear too frequent. So let me pull this up right now. This is the next one. IBRX shares trading higher after the Saudi FDA granted accelerated approval of their drug for use in combination, with non-small cell lung cancer. And then check this. This is even crazier. So they approved it for the non-small cell lung cancer, but then actually on the same day, they also approved it for bladder cancer treatment. So it was a double approval. Pretty nuts, right? Now, let me ask our students this. If you're someone like Tim here in our live trading room that has a lot of experience in these medical stocks, pharma stocks, and just, we know how it goes normally. When was the last time that you heard a company got like major FDA approval, fast tracked for anything, cancer or any other sort of diseases or pandemics or whatever? What do we got? A couple of us here saying COVID. Absolutely. I mean, Johnson and Johnson, Moderna. I mean, look at where they are now. I mean, that was a much different situation, at least, and hopefully it will be, because if the news is real and legit on this drug, then it's going to save millions and millions of people's lives. I mean, probably much, much more than the COVID vaccine, honestly, because if this treats multiple different types of cancers, oh my God, I mean, this is what the world's been looking for all this time, right? Now, it's not so easy to just believe a headline and just say, oh my God, this is incredible news. But when you think about it, comparing it to COVID back in 2020, Johnson & Johnson had a pretty good slingshot here, 109 up to 155. I mean, that was just the starting one here. Obviously, Moderna was one of the largest ones, 36 up to nearly 500. Pfizer back then too, obviously larger cap. But the thing is that they all made these extensive runs. So with IBRX, when you hear news of any sort of drug, you can't trust it as far as you could throw it, because at any point they can not meet their endpoints for their studies on phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. FDA approval is the end of the roadmap. That's just the end result that all these companies want for their drugs. So you're telling me that they got approved, fast track approval, mind you, but they still got approved by an FDA for not just one type of cancer, but two. And I mean, let's just be transparent here. What government's, giving this approval? What country? Saudi? Yeah, I think they got money, right? So if they're the main ones buying this drug from the company to, help their residents and their citizens, then I would say that this is just 1 + 1 = 2 in terms of a day trade, at least to begin. The swing trade, that's something that we'll dig into next. But simply put, when the news came out Wednesday morning and we saw at least the initial pop, I got to go back on my chart. When we saw the initial pop on the chart here, how can you not think about, all right, well, what happens if this ends up making a higher high? I'm talking about here. Pulled back after the market opened up, seemed like a pop and drop type of trade. I wasn't really too interested in it here at this point, at this time. But if it could start to prove itself and build higher lows, it could be a really strong day trade once again. It just wasn't, though, that day, was it? This thing really wasn't looking good going into the early afternoon. Just kind of your prototypical pump and dump type of stock. So that news didn't really seem that strong at the time. Now, at this point in the pre-market earlier, we were calling out a couple of different levels at the time, that led to a pretty good move. Let me try and get my screens here correct. There we go. So this is the chat from January 14th, just from last week on that Wednesday. We called out the news right at that time. And in the pre-market, we were saying if IBRX can re-break, and most importantly, if it could hold above 3, then I believe it could run. We're talking about that 3 level, an iceberg at 298 needs to hold as support. This was all in the pre-market that Wednesday morning, mind you. So unfortunately, earlier it did not hold over it. It broke below, it chipped around, it broke below. This thing wasn't looking good. So we were looking at other trades at this point. We weren't really sipping the Kool-Aid. We weren't buying the news on this thing just at the time. Now, what if it could hold over 3? What if there could, or what if the stock could break back over 3? What if we keep seeing more buyers attack the offer at that price? Well, then it's possible. So at least at this point, we're heading into 2:30, 3 o'clock. I know a lot of our students were with me earlier in our phase 1 stock course just earlier today. I was teaching a group class. Students like Sam and Margaret and Debbie were all part of it. And they learned that, hey, from 3 and especially 3:30 going into the market close, that is your next best chance outside of the first hour here for us to realize a move. At least from 3, if not 3:30, going into the market close, that could be our next best opportunity. So it is at least picking back up and back over 3. The issue is it's not popping, it's not running. I would figure if the news is that strong that it would at least make that move. And at the time, well, I wasn't really trying to swing trade it right out the gate. I wasn't necessarily so gung-ho about the company. I don't know this thing at all. I haven't done any research on the company. I just like the news headline. And I like the volume. It has a good spread. So made it really tradable, mind you. Any of our students here, of course, this is something I'd like to call out because at least it has good volume, good spread, good liquidity. My guess would be that the float on this thing is still relatively low, but it's not microscopic. It's not, 2 million share float stock is my guess. I'm sure it's a little bit more than that, right? Just has good orders. I do like that part. Here's the selling point. Here's the thing that made me flip everything upside down and say, oh shit, I think this might end up actually being an incredible swing trade here. Let me just take a look. So the market was about to close, and out of nowhere, we see this giant spike of volume. Now, if you're a student of mine more in the phase 2 curriculum that we teach here at Cyber Trading University, I talk a lot about what's called the opening and closing bell prints on the time and sales window. This is not one of those. This actually took place, smack dab in the middle of the afternoon. This was not at 4 p.m. This was at 3:55 p.m. This was right before the market was closing, but 7 million shares. This is the full size. So I just made this the full share size here. So don't need to add 2 zeros. I did that there for you, but 7 million shares. I mean, it's green. So what do we nickname the green as, folks, on time and sales? What do we nickname the green? Charles, Sam, Tim, Bill, Margaret, buyers, buying pressure, right? Absolutely. So when I saw that, my eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. So at that point, I figured I'm already in the trade from $3. That was my entry here when it was nipping and testing. I figured, all right, like as a normal CTU day trade, like maybe it could run in the close. I was calling it out for all of our students there in the room at the time. I want to give a big shout out to one of our students, Tim, coming on up here in just a bit. He killed it with me on this trade, but man, he's been on top of this trade for a little bit. He's got an even better entry. So just to tell you, at least, we've been on top of it as a group since Wednesday. And certainly by the afternoon, we were focused around this 3 level. So again, if you're on social media, the reason I show all of this here is to show students, follow the chat. If you're in this room live, don't focus as much on the chart shown on the screen. Focus on the chat. That's where we're making our call outs here. So, I guess before that transaction came out, I guess I could tell you transparently enough, I was thinking of holding it overnight. Still a fan of the news, but more importantly, it's holding over 3. And then there was a new iceberg on the bid at 282. Tim right there saying it held the 3 level. But then that's where I posted. This was like right after the market closed. I caught wind of that transaction, the 7 million share transaction. That is not a closing print. I emphasize that because we rarely ever see something like that happen. Not just at any point during the day, but I mean, just minutes right before the close. you'd figure that somebody knew something, right? And that's exactly where I've started to, post about this stock on my own social media, just for my own journaling. I do this too. But, I just kind of put it out there. I'm like, what the heck? There's a 7 million share transaction that came out on this trade. Here it is. So this is my own social media here, but if somebody knows something here, got a lot of traction, at least the 7 million shares. This is the historical graph, which we'll dig into next. So, going into this as a swing trade, we'll go into what's ahead for this week. But for all this here, Sharon, Margaret, Bill, Tim, you know at least, but Sam and Charles, real quick, looking at this chart from left to right, what's the trend? Looking at this chart here on my weekly chart, the historical chart goes from left to right. What's the trend? From 2020 to 2026, I'm looking for a one-word answer. I want to make it that simple. I want to make it that easy. Generally, down. Now, if we want to get fancy, we could say it went up, and then primarily after 2021, down, down, down. The more optimistic people might say flat, right? But if it's flat, touche, but it's still making lower highs. When a stock is making lower highs, the buyers are not in control. So I'll even point out, without going off course, that's why I'm out on FIG, right? That's where I told you Insider Live Trading Room, the end of last week, I got out on this over 30. Look at where it's at today. Lower highs. So could I trust this chart, the weekly chart, yet? Even though it was closing good on that one day, that Wednesday, no, I can't trust it as far as I could throw it here. It's got to prove itself to me. So it's not like I'm like ripping my hair out, like frustrated or whatever. I'm up on the trade, and we have a 7 million share buy print that came in at market. Figure somebody knows something. So I'm optimistic, but let it show me something. It needs to make a big move shortly after, right? That's what I say for any one day trade anyway, but especially for something that is not proven here. Hey, chop, chop. Let's see this thing run, and thankfully that's what happened at least Thursday, Friday, today. So let's go back to this chart at least here. There's a lot more to dig into. Here's the 7 million share buy print that came in now. That's that big fat green line right there. So you could see just the next morning it held above it. It was pushing up early. Those are all good signs. And then, of course, the big pop afterwards. So, just in my situation here, and for our students here too, Charles killed it on this trade. Tim's doing great on it. Pat was doing great. Alan was doing great, I believe. A bunch of us, if I'm not mistaken. When you get that pop, you know that you're in the driver's seat. Because if it ends up pulling back down more, you have to trust this level here as support. 7 million shares bought at market. So you figure that's either a real buy print or there's some short that's getting crushed and he got wrecked. He had a cover. Either way, I just kind of call that buying pressure. So just to tell you, I'm going to use that as support at a worst case minimum or a worst case scenario. So just here, it ended up pulling back a bit. I'm just going to hang in though, see what it does. Pushed back up. I hung into the trade from there. It obviously continued up that much more. At this point, though, when it started to push up a little bit higher, that was on the Thursday, you got to start thinking, okay, obviously I held one day already, and the news sounds good. A 7 million share buy print looks good. If it smells good and it looks good, then I feel like we're in a good spot here to just let this ride. We still need to know where our next major levels are, right? We still need to have a game plan of where the big sellers are. Man, I wish I had this even better for you. I probably have this on my own Twitter. I probably have it on my Twitter page somewhere here. Just give me a second. I'm going to try and pull this up here for all of us. Basically, I was game planning this, just pointing out that we had a couple of different resistances, based on Bookmap. I think I even stripped my Twitter. Nope, I got it right here. All right, so let me pull this back here. Here we go. So pretty much we ended up seeing an order out there from Wednesday into Thursday into even today, Tuesday of this week, right at 10 bucks. 500,000 shares was out there last week. As of this morning, I think there was like 150,000. Can that create a target? Could that be a potential level where we see this hit a top and that's a good area for us to exit the trade at? It definitely is. It absolutely is. I feel pretty confident that this, could be a target. Now, what if there's something that pops up before that? What if there is a better level from the historical chart, the weekly chart there? Well, that's what we have to focus on first, right? This is a nice goal to have, but there might be something even before 10 that sticks out here first. There's not much really on the book, but that's where going into today, I was trying to provide a couple of different levels, and I sent this out last night. So here are the levels that I would expect to act as resistance here the more this keeps going up. So we do have historical resistance back from 2022. I'm going to show this more zoomed in here in a bit, but focus on the green, the purple lines here, the two tiny purple lines. That's back from 2022. Good, just good resistance. Good resistance. A couple of different wicks here. 2023, 2024 held below the lower of the two purple lines. So that's been holding pretty consistently across a good stretch of time for about 4 years. So I'm thinking at least the first time that this runs up to that $7.50 to $8 area, well, it's possible that we would see resistance hold. So that kind of takes us ahead towards this morning. And I ended up closing out 1/4 of my trade just right at 751. Just as it was pushing up here, I ended up closing out just pretty much at this point, quarter of my position, 1/4. So I still have 75% left, but I feel confident in this attempting to hold support, at least trying to give it the benefit of the doubt and seeing it try and build from here. There was a question that I was asked earlier, actually in one of the paid classes here, so I have more time to answer it in this workshop. But from one of our students asking, hey, when is it more ideal to trade a stock in the post market, to enter and exit, that is, to day trade a stock after the market closes, after 4 p.m. Eastern time? Me personally, and partly this is opinion fueled, but I'm not as comfortable trading in and out aggressively during the post market comparative to the pre market. I personally feel as if there's more eyeballs on the pre market getting prepared for their day than there are people still kind of straggling around at the end of the day, still trying to trade. But that partly is opinion fueled. Fausto trained me all of these years back, about 13 years ago, pretty much just, we trade the pre-market. We want to do the first hour. We treat this as a part-time job. We carry on with our day here. Granted, we're in the East Coast of the United States. So maybe if you're on the West Coast, it's a little different of a story. Maybe if you're in Europe, Asia, Africa, etc., like it's a different story based on where you live. But hey, after 6, 7, 8 hours of being behind a bright ass computer screen, I think most people on the East Coast, US and Canada, are finishing up. They're not really as aggressive in the post market than they were in the pre market, even. But with that, though, let's at least show how there could have been a pretty good opportunity to proactively trade this stock in the post market session. And let me just reiterate something. I mean, whether you're trading pre market or post market, ideally, and hey, we all have to look at our own selves in the mirror here when we're kind of just saying, are we going to trade a stock or not? Because it's a matter of exposing ourselves to a level of risk. You got to make sure the stock has a good spread. And that's not as frequent in pre and post market trading. It's just simply not. Now, this stock is a really good exception because in the pre and post market this past week, it's been on a pretty tight spread. If not a consistent 1 cent spread, then it was on a 1, 2, 3 cent spread. And, that's pretty decent. That's pretty solid altogether, especially for extended hours trading. Make sure it maintains that spread. Make sure it doesn't randomly open up big, because that's where a lot of the liquidity is leaving the trade. Now, though, that's where it's easy to say, though, what was this, on Thursday? Yeah, on Thursday afternoon. This happened at 5:40 p.m. Eastern time, had a huge pop, ended up running up pretty nicely. And then even on Friday, I think even once more, it actually continued, right? Friday afternoon into the weekend. I mean, the last second here. So I don't know who's really at their desk at 7 p.m. Eastern. I think a lot of us are out to dinner with their loved ones or, maybe with some friends there at that time. But let's go over what happens Wednesday afternoon here, right? Now we know the stock, it does have a good order book. Definitely back last week it did. The more this goes up, it will thin out. But at least here, it was on a good spread, good order book. For a stock around this price, just looking at this chart here, where would you suspect, based on the chart, but also based on where you normally expect to find iceberg orders, where would we assume to have a resistance here? Where would we assume to have a resistance? Looking at this chart as I show it, looking at, assuming looking at level 3 and level 4 based on where we typically find iceberg orders. Right? Tim leading everyone into that answer perfectly, in fact. So, you namely want to focus on whole number levels and 50-cent levels. And in this case, well, $4. There was about 100,000 shares, 107,000 shares before the end of the day on this Thursday, back on Thursday afternoon. Now, I don't think that this did it touch 4? I don't know if that plays a huge part in the story because it took hours for it to retest. So you probably have to reset the process over again. But yeah, at first, this didn't even touch 4. So you definitely need to see this test it numerous times. And hey, the more times it could keep pushing it, there is a chance for a much better move. Give me a sec here. Just going to recalibrate. So that's where, at least, here we go. Going into the after hours, it ended up moving back up pretty much right to that line. And from there, it was holding around it. But if you could see this test $4, and granted, in a more ideal trading environment, if the stars want to align, in this case it did, right? It doesn't always, but when the stars want to align, one good thing would be to see, all right, it breaks over 4, and there really isn't much after $4. If there really isn't much volume out there on the order book above 4, then it allows the stock free room to run. So this is what it looked like going into the end of the day on Thursday. See how this red line is getting hit? It's getting tested, and there really isn't anything above, $4 that resembles anything of good size. Normally, if you have an orange red line sticking out here, this would create at least some sort of resistance. Not much above it. Not much above it until 5. There might be something, a little something here. I see 10,000 at $4.35. Hey, if this could pop from $4 up to $4.35, I feel like that's a nice little scalp trade. But shoot, there really isn't anything of good size that I would respect in between 4 and 5. That's what allowed it room to run. So obviously it's easy to say in hindsight, but good news, stock was already trending up after the news came out. There was a 7 million share buy print that came in before this even happened. So in the whole sense of following the big money, right? It's easy to say that this stock made a near 100% move a day and a half after a 7 million share transaction set off on the time and sales. And once this broke over 4, there wasn't really anything out there until 5. So this doesn't always happen. I don't advocate to trade post-market. like every day. I do not. I think that you're going to save yourself a lot of energy. I think that you're going to put your time and energy to much better use as a human if you're not stuck at your desk after 4 p.m. Eastern, more days than not. Granted, there are certain days where if there is news coming out with earnings like Tesla, Nvidia, and we're in earnings season coming on up, that's a little different, especially for anyone that's focused on their swing trades or investments long term. Uh, Again, this news doesn't hit too frequent. Getting fast track FDA approval, from a pretty wealthy nation government, and it's treating multiple different types of cancers, right? Like this doesn't just happen on a weekly occasion. So, just to mention, thankfully, this ended up playing out really well, and just otherwise, we don't always turn a day trade into a swing trade. We rarely ever do that. The reason I felt a little bit more comfortable trying to even swing trade this was because of the liquidity. It has a really good spread. And this is like live right now. So even back from last week, it was that much more filled in. So super tradable, right? You always hear me tell you, like, guys, don't focus on the shiny object in the room. This is not the shiny object in the room. This is a really strong trade off of very strong news, but the liquidity is A plus. All right. Now, real quick, want to give a quick shout out to one of our gold students, Tim. Tim ended up killing it on this trade. I think he's still in with me, but this is like Tim's forte. He loves trading the small cap, stocks, the biotechs and the pharma stocks. That's just his expertise. So, he made a post in the trading room. I was like, oh shoot, maybe he meant like like 325 or so, $3.25. And he's like, no, 225 I'm in from. And he messaged me on the site. He's like, no, I actually entered back on January 9th, even before this FDA news came out. Tim entered on this trade after it broke and closed above a 6-month downtrend line on January 8th. So again, this is just something that he hones in on himself. This is his forte. This is like his expertise from his occupation, from his profession over his lifetime. So, he loves looking at these pharma stocks, biotech stocks. And, he's been on this for a little while. It closed above a 6-month downtrend line. And then, he checked this stock daily because of where they are with their drug. And he told me that this stock is very heavily shorted. So, more or less, he's been waiting for the shorts to get crushed. I don't know where you have your trend line, Tim. We'll chat on the side. Just more or less, just generally speaking, there's a lot of ways that you can cut the pie. I would not be so gun ho about basing it off the top here because this is so parabolic. It makes it really tough. Something like that, that might fit pretty well. There's a lot of ways that you can cut it, but more or less, news, it did break a local higher high, at least back from here, back from June of last year, back from February of this past year. And it's over those smaller, more local resistance levels. Now we got to worry about this. Now we got to worry about the larger resistance, the one that's really been holding here since 2022, Tim. So the 750 to 8, this area put together. That's where earlier today I took a quarter of my position out. Why the hell not? I'm in from 3. For any of the stocks that we day trade, I mean, hey, if we could pick up 30%, 20, 30% on a day trade like that, that's incredible. As far as my swing trades go last year, I had a number of swing trades that ended up being profitable, 40 to 50% winners soon. And the BBAI trades were two that stood out to me. The TKO one was really nice. The Philip Morris one was really nice. But my two best ones were the Soon and the BBAI, the smaller cap AI stocks. Those were between 40 to 50%. So I'm up over 100% on this thing, and it's at a major historical resistance. I've learned the hard way by being greedy. I've learned the hard way by trying to hold my breath a little too long and shooting for the stars. And then it comes crumbling all the way back down. So I want to point out, I took a quarter of my trade out just for the hell of it. Like, absolutely. I love the news, love the volume, love the trend it's already made. But granted, it's up over 100% now. It was up over 150% earlier. You know, every roller coaster has a top. Now, with that though, there is something I do want to bring up. I mean, this still is a small cap stock. Uh, I think I can get it here. You know what? I was gonna ask my friend Tim here to be a helping hand. You know what, Tim? I got it right here. Actually, super quick. I got it. What's the float? What's the float? 330 million. Pretty solid. 331 will round up, but that's pretty decent. I like that. That's pretty good. That's not like 2 million shares. That's not 20 million share float. It's not Nvidia, but it's definitely decent sized float. That kind of eases some concerns for me right now, actually, as I talk to you live. It actually does ease a small concern. It's still possible this might hit. But, the only thing that stands out to me that would really F up this trade, for lack of better phrasing, is if this company does some sort of direct offering of shares. And we see this happen so many times with small cap stocks, right? So more or less, I posted this earlier just to update the non-trading room people. Just I advocate anyone on social join us coming up just even later on today, directly live inside our room, because I'm going to probably give less comments on the IBRX going forward. But more or less, we were saying not as informed on the company financials. I'm truly not. I don't know if they're cash positive or whatever the case may be. But I'm telling you, I would hate to see some random offering news come out, because that is frequent within the smaller cap stocks. It's a way to try and raise more capital. It injects more liquidity into the outstanding shares, but it tanks the stock price. So it was already up enough for me. It's at a level that I felt very confident would act as resistance the first time if tested. But then there's also this looming concern, not to become conspiracy theory guy here or rip my hair out paranoia style. But hey, we see this happen on the day trading side of things. We see a lot of these small cap stocks just tank because, well, hey, they come out direct offering news or something to do with their convertible notes, whatever the hell it is, right? So why not take a quarter of your position out at least? Now, at least from this point, let me even show something else that happened. So back from Friday into the end of the week, into the weekend, this did pop up even more. Now, if you remember, I showed you that 7 million share transaction, right? That 7 million share buy print. This kind of sticks out here, doesn't it? That looks pretty reminiscent. So on Friday, when this popped up here instantly, I had to dig through my time in sales and I'd ask, well, what the hell was that? Not as big as 7 million, but another 2.5 million shares got filled. Yellow. Ooh, real quick, pop quiz. All of us here, I didn't go over this in our live class earlier. It's coming up in our phase 1 curriculum across the next couple months. But what does yellow actually mean? What does yellow mean, folks? What do we nickname the yellow? What is the technical fancy schmancy, definition for yellow? There we go. So, a few of us giving the proper nickname, we'll kind of group it with the green. We'll say, oh, it's buying still. It's green. We kind of count that with green. It's a form of buying pressure. So I love that. It's great. Well, yellow technically means it's not filled at the ask like green is. It's actually filled above it. It's filled above it. So late at first the punch there, a bunch of us there following up as well. So simply put, hey, the more the merrier, the more green or yellow, right? And especially these big guys, 7 million from Wednesday afternoon. This was from Friday, early afternoon, 12:25 Eastern. So, hey, whatever 2.5 million is right there, that was at $5.40. 540. So how is that? How is 540 a level going into the remainder of that day? Was it a good level to use? Was it an effective entry level at all? Because this happened pretty much right here. And the stock dropped actually at first. So your initial reaction after that print came in, well, it pulled back. And from this test, at 12:25 or whatever to this test at 2:05. It's about an hour and a half. From here to here, a little bit less. I could see someone trying to jump in here going into the mid-afternoon as some sort of day trade, trying to scalp it, and it was right place, wrong time here, and it pulls back. I would be looking for this to act clean as support and then for it to run up higher after. So this would be one moment just between full transparency. Trading is never perfect, 100% in hindsight. No chart really is ever perfect in nature. So right place, wrong time. And then from here, right place, right time. It keeps knocking on that door and it breaks out here, right above 540, breaks out right at this time. Real quick, what time does this break out here where I put my cursor on? What time is that? Huh. Ain't that funny? What time is that, folks? Pretty much right on the gun, maybe a couple minutes after, right, Sam? But 3:30 Eastern, 15:30, right? So that time is where you should expect program trading to kick in. We just went over that in the phase 1 course with our new upgraded slides. So if you didn't catch that class earlier, you missed out big, but we'll come back later on this afternoon for our next one. Now, hey, coming up here right at 3:30, it retested the level. Perfect move, right? So, hey, even if you took it here as a day trade type of move, you need to have it hold support. It doesn't, you take a quick loss in out or break even trade. That's it. Then it keeps knocking on that door, and then from that point, obviously, not only does it move off that level, but essentially it flips it into support. Post market might get a couple shakes here or there, but this generally builds nicely off support. Flips resistance into support, and yeah, it ended up running up way higher, right? So kind of funny how that 2.5 million share buy print created a really strong level on this trade. And granted, yes, there are points where it could be right place, wrong time. But if the stock keeps fighting and knocking on that door, who's winning that battle? The buyers. Now, that leads us to today, early shakes in the morning, like I'm still sleeping here. I'm just wiping the crust out of my eyes here at 6 o'clock. And, it generally held over that level and then pushed back up a lot higher into my resistance. So going into this week, what are we looking for? Just to continue to see higher lows, but more or less on the daily chart now. So this has certainly become a swing chart that we need to see maintain support. It's not so easy to see that when you do have these gaps. So typically you're going to see one of these gaps get filled, if not both. It wouldn't shock me to have this come back down at 551, then build back up again. Wouldn't shock me to see it come back down to $4, guys. Not saying it will. I'm just saying that a lot of gaps do get filled, especially this one here. Not just because it's the first one. That has to come first in order for this to drop lower. But point being, this is Friday's candle. This is the beginning of the next week. This is today, Tuesday. So we were off yesterday, Friday, Tuesday. It's just the weekly gap. I feel like that is more prone to getting filled. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. And if it doesn't do that, then even better, because I'm going to hang into the 3/4 of my remaining position. And if you're Sam, Leda, Margaret, Uma, any of our students here, I'm going to update you first on this, right? I'm going to tell you immediately what I end up doing. It might be during the broadcast in the morning or the afternoon. So I'm going to let you know immediately what happens on this trade. Now, otherwise, let me know if you have any questions altogether, folks. If you're inside our live trading room, if you're on social right now, give me a quick shout right now if you have any questions. I do have one that kind of ties into this a bit. Just a bit here. Give me a sec. Just had one that ties into this briefly. We'll just knock this one out quick. So Sam had a question. This was in relation to a different stock, but I just to kind of use it here. He had a quick FYI on IVF. We'll just kind of say this here. Right at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:15 in the morning, right around that window, you see these giant spikes, these big spikes on the chart. At 8 a.m., there's always a big spike, but the 8:15 spike, it's pretty unusual. During this spike, do all the stocks get traded on the sell and buy down to, okay, so more or less to provide clarity is why you see these like obnoxiously long and large wicks on my graph. It revolves around late prints. You can call it late prints, you can call it delayed prints, either way. This is trading that took place, whether it be from the early hours of the morning or even from the prior overnight session. So, that's just where right here, this wick tops off right with this high. This one, I reckon, or this one, let's see, does it align evenly with the lows, or it's like pretty much right there? Loosely speaking, it's around this support area. But those are just late reported transactions that took off from earlier, whether it be in the morning or whether it be from the prior overnight session. You see this happen though on any of these trades. Nvidia, like, look, Nvidia here, look at this wick. It's all the way up top here at 183. That was likely from Friday overnight into the weekend session, or it could have been from like the overnight Sunday, or overnight Monday into today. Like last night at 8 p.m., you can go on Robinhood and look at the 24-hour quote unquote trading on a lot of these larger cap stocks. So it could have been even from that. But this is where I'll say that these wicks are obnoxious. They really are, right? If you think that they're not like easy on the eyes, I'm right there with you. It's obnoxious. It gets in the way. I don't make any use of them. I never have. So literally, since I don't put them to use, when I see them on my graph, it just is a distraction. It's just noise. Uh, the way that I trade that, if I ever were to, if you were to see a giant spike of volume that, in the hundreds of thousands or millions, right at 8 o'clock in the morning, that would be where I would say, okay, do we have big prints on Bookmap? Is there a big dot on Bookmap right at 8 o'clock or at 8:15, Sam, on this trade? I'll go to IVF because that's the one you were asking on, right? Yeah, I mean, so this is basically the same thing. This just happened a little bit after 8 o'clock. I'm just grouping this with basically the 8 o'clock spikes here. It's the same thing pretty much. Let's see. Was there any trading going on here from earlier in pre-market at those prices? Yeah, 5 o'clock at least. That makes sense. That at least aligns with some of the real trading that was going on here at 5 o'clock, 5:20 in the morning. So just once 8 o'clock hits, just to let you know, this goes for everyone else at least. Sam definitely is experienced in this, but just you got to let this be noise. Don't let it be, don't let it be noise. Just let it be pretty much that, and that's it. Don't give it really any respect. Don't give it much of your attention. If you have Bookmap, go through Bookmap and see, all right, is there any big volume getting filled there on the CVP column, on the volume dots? Those are things I would really look at. Yeah, if there was a way for me to get rid of those spikes, I would. I just can't. It's kind of like you could say a glitch. You can say, and I'm not an algo, but more of a glitch and just programmed within my platform. But it's based on late/delayed reported transactions. All right, couple quick ones really fast here. So I was going to write you back here, Steve, on this just later on this afternoon. I saw it come in yesterday at night. So one of our new gold students kind of asked him quick, am I supposed to go through the phase 2 or should I wait for the phase 1 live classes? One of our new gold students. So keep in mind that we're conducting our live phase 1 classes this week, but we conduct our classes every month. And the way our curriculum is broken down is essentially in a 3-month cycle. It's in a 3-month cycle of classes. Every 3 months is a full cycle of classes that we provide. I'll show you what that exactly means right here. So this is basically the new course schedule that I unveiled just earlier today. So if you're a new gold student, you've gone through a number of these classes actually already from the past year. But otherwise, though, I would have you go through phase 2. If you've gone through all of phase 1 from last year, 1 through 12, then I would say at that point, move on to phase 2. These are going to be the new phase 1 classes that I started here today. We're going to be using for 2026. Mostly the same classes, maybe 1 or 2 that are quote unquote new to phase 1. But if you've gone through all of phase one from 2025, at that point, I would recommend just go through phase two. Start off on phase two then, Steve. All right. So, I'll write you back either way on the side, though, just so you know in full there. But if you have any other questions on that, just let me know. Sam saying, just to follow up, I got it that the 8 a.m. spike is noise, but it was weird it did it at 8:15. Agreed. Agreed. No, yeah. I mean, the later from 8 o'clock it gets kind of becomes more unusual, right? But when it's that big of a spike, definitely just, dig into Bookmap, play a little investigator for a second, but don't give it respect immediately. Kind of in the sense of IBRX in general with that move, let it prove itself to you, right? So if you see some big volume that got filled, that's different. But other than that, yeah, it's weird, but just kind of move on from it at that point, right? It's like, okay. Real quick. Yes. So I was going to get through a couple more questions that came in. So give me a quick moment right now. So this one came in from one of our students asking briefly, hey, Josh, how do you buy a dip? How do you plan to buy a dip on a trade? So this one is a little interesting because we always advocate don't catch a falling knife, right? I mean, IBRX, when this is dropping and pulling back, once support does build, that would be a pretty good opportunity to look to jump in if you haven't yet. Real quick, if we happen to see a potential support, how is that potential support originally made up? Like what leads us to say a stock is now support? And what would lead us to say that now, at this point, this is a support level? What typically becomes a support level, might I ask? What typically can flip into a support level, might I ask? There we go. A couple of us here. Chris, Sam, right away saying resistance, R, absolutely. So, at least in terms of buying a dip, well, I'm going to look to see where I had previous resistance. Actually, that's a good segue because I had someone kind of ask me on like my own Twitter, kind of just asking like, all right, where do we find support? What's the next level? Or like, do I just jump in right now? What do I do? And I said to him, like, well, the rule of thumb, as good as the news is here, you got to wait to see support build, but look to see where it broke out from as resistance and see if that could flip. So that's where, although it held the resistance at 750 and $8, something like this, that's where I'm telling you, wait to try and see this dip or this gap get filled. And then from there, there's a chance that this in its own could be support. But the more that this went up, 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 up over the last few days, you figure one of these have got to look to reflip back into support. We also did have somewhat decent support here, a little, if not there, then right around 450, 470-ish. So if it comes down there, then ideally what you want to see is the stock crash into that area, go under, and then back over, a little tiny nip under, and then back over. And that would get me in the trade. And then it's a matter of seeing at least the reaction after. I'll go back to FIG for 2 seconds there, just because I had that on FIG. I had such a good entry on FIG. It played out perfectly at first on my entry. Perfectly at first. 33, 35. The combination of those two prices. That was support back from $90. So it crashed into it under, over, held support so well. But if it's not making that big reaction after that point, if it's just kind of stalling out, not making that big move shortly after, odds are it's going to make a big move shortly after, just not in your direction. The more that support keeps getting poked at, the sellers are winning that battle again. So eventually, once this broke below this support, I knew I had to give up soon. Friday afternoon, I pulled out of this trade before it went down towards like $30. And from there, obviously, look at where it's at this morning. So this is one of the worst performing stocks over the last year. I just had a good opportunity to try and see support build. But there's a big difference between looking for that strategic under over to at least get you in the trade versus recklessly catching a falling knife. So just, long story short, pun intended, to catch a dip, you got to at least have a good resistance first to try and see it flip into support. This did not have that. But otherwise, if you do have at least a support level you do feel confident in, you got to have it go under and over, little nip under and over right there. All right. Last one briefly, just before we finish up, just last question that came in. Actually, this was from last week. Pardon me. Give me a quick moment here. I got to actually scroll back a small bit here. Oh, man. Give me a moment. One of these slipped through the cracks, I feel. Just give me a quick moment here. Nabil, unfortunately, I don't have your email. So in regards to stop loss overnight. Okay, so actually I had a trader, something slightly different. I had a trader kind of send me their platform, and I'm going to write them back also on the side. But they were kind of talking about something similar, Nabil. One thing I want to clarify, and this will kind of answer both emails that did come in. No one can use a stop order in the pre-market to close a trade out. You could use what's called a GTC order or a GTD, good till close, basically, or good till day. But point being is that you could set that order and more or less the next day, it will remain out there so you don't have to reset it again. However, there's no type of stop order that closes your trade out during the pre-market. I can't use a stop limit order to close out any trade before 9:30 Eastern time. Doesn't matter if that's a swing trade, a day trade, an overnighter. Just if I'm trading, if I'm trying to close a position out, I need to use a limit order to close that thing out before 9:30. During the after hours and the pre-market, I can't use a stop limit order. I also can't use a market order. I need to buy and sell specifically using a limit order during the pre-market, during the post-market, if I want to get my orders filled. Now, again, just to make the clarification, there is a type of order, we'll say GTC, good till close. And let's say if you set up a stop order for a trade, if it's via GTC, good till close, that order will remain out there and as a usable stop order for the next trading day. So you don't have to set that order again, but that order won't activate in the pre-market. It won't close your trade out in the pre-market. At 9:30 in the morning, ding, 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 different story. If it hits your price after the market opens, ding, 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 different story. But simply put, if you're swing trading and you have a stop order on it, well, if it's a GTC order, you're doing yourself a benefit by using a good till close GTC type order because you don't have to set the same order over and over and over and over every single day of the week. But keep in mind, that doesn't prevent you from having gaps. Like, for instance, use Fig here. What if I didn't get out on this trade? What if I didn't get out on this trade Friday afternoon, right? Would have been a little troublesome for me to get out in the pre-market, let alone right when the market opens up here today, because it's opening up a lot lower, right? There's no stop order that will save you from gaps. All right. Now, if you have any follow-ups on that, Nabil, please let me know. You certainly know where to find me. Anyone here, Nabil, Sam, Chris, Leda, Margaret, all of us here in chat. If you have any other follow-up questions across this day or week, just let me know. Shoot me over a quick private chat. Super easy for me to write you back just in between coaching sessions, in between classes on the side. But folks, we're going to wrap up at least for right now. So hope that you enjoyed. And then, again, going into the rest of this week, see what happens on this IBRX. I'm very optimistic long term. I am believing the news. I'm a believer of the CEO. I've seen a couple of interviews on him and with him. He seems like a very sharp guy, a big fan of him now. But hey, if support doesn't hold, we gotta plan ahead of time. We gotta know when to get out. So that's where I took a quarter of my trade out earlier, rightfully so, when it hit the resistance here. Now, if it keeps holding higher lows, then we might be in for an even better afternoon. But it's moved up a lot already. So if it begins to exhaust out today, tomorrow, Thursday, and maybe Friday comes back up again, that's an idea. But at least we'll see what happens going into later on today and then tomorrow. So make sure to follow and subscribe right to our YouTube or X account here. Our main account, just at Cyber Trading U. Hit the follow or subscribe button right there. We stream live there every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as long as it's not holiday at least. So we were not streaming yesterday, but at least otherwise, all other weekdays, Monday to Friday, join us at Cyber Trading U on social. Otherwise, just join us directly inside our live trading room. That banner's going by pretty quick here this afternoon. That's a pretty quick moving banner on the bottom there in blue, ain't it? I got to figure out a way to slow that thing down. I thought that was a little bit see what we did? See what we did there? I think someone had that sped up a little bit. Look how fast that thing's going now if you're on social. Look at that. Yeah, we got to slow that puppy down. There we go. All right. So, folks, join us directly inside our live trading room. Go right down to the link down at the bottom there, ctu.co/trial. Otherwise, you could scan that QR code. Join us directly inside our room via this QR code here flashing on the screen. But our next broadcast will be at 2:30 Eastern just for the afternoon meeting. From Margaret, Bill, Leda, all of us there right now. I look forward to seeing you in just a bit. Take care.